president's stew. And it's surprising that tucked back into the hills in places you don't know it, but there's a lot of them, and most of them end up pretty close to some waterways. I'm coming to you live from the Tin Mountain Conservation Center because we had a little audio trouble last week, and we're cable up here. So I'm not on the board up here, but I do a lot of work up here. So I have a key so I can let myself in and use their broadband. This is a driveway in Madison that is, that's all the same driveway. All those arrows you can see going back and forth. That's the view from Google Earth. 1,600 feet with 4 switchbacks, 175 feet of elevation change, 11% grade. A couple of gals live on the top of that. They got a fantastic view, but the driveway, needless to say, has been a challenge over the years, but we've met it, and we've succeeded with using some of the principles we'll talk about here tonight. Okay, road erosion is inconvenient. It's unsightly, it's expensive to repair, but what's the greater danger, particularly in the area of danger to the lakes? Runoff carries sediment and nutrients into surface waters. That is a road, by the way, or was a road, became a road again. It's easy to see the sediment, but what about the invisible nutrients? Phosphorus is one of those invisible nutrients, and it's a natural element found in the soil. It's an important nutrient needed to sustain both plant and animal life. It's in the environment, and it's in fertilizer, detergent, sewage, although we've gotten a lot of that stuff out of detergents, but it occurs naturally in soil and organic material. It's in that middle number in the bag when you buy fertilizer, or a lot of fertilizers. How does it affect us? It's a whole litany of things that it does to cause damage to the lakes, and this is the outcome. The water becomes unpleasant to swim in or drink. Recreational potential and property value adversely affected. I got involved in this heavily when I was invited to do a demonstration at China Lake in Maine that had really gone downhill. The people got together and they rallied around, and they did a lot of things. They brought the quality of the lake back up. I was invited to go up and do a demonstration, and I think the night after the demonstration, it rained like 3 inches, and when people went back up the next day to see if there was anything left, and they said, "Wow, it's just the way he left it." It can be done, and there's really no secrets. And I've tried to make those non-secrets available in a book that's available online that maybe some of you have already had a chance to look at. That's me in the spring, mud season, working on a dirt road with the device that I developed 30 years ago for maintaining roads. It goes on a truck or a tractor. I use it constantly. That has led me to all these different developments that I take care of, and this has received a lot of popularity throughout New Hampshire and Maine. This is a New Hampshire Trails truck several years ago. Unfortunately, we've been out of production for some time for various reasons that I'd love to talk with people about in case somebody wanted to take on the production again, because the thing really works. Why are gravel roads such a problem compared to construction sites? Okay, there's something around most construction sites that we don't get around roads. Silt fences. By regulation, most projects have a silt fence around them to trap whatever might be running off. Gravel roads don't have them for their entire existence, and they're not. They always remain gravel. They're never stabilized with grass or pavement. Unfortunately, the same techniques we use to improve the road surface to reduce erosion also make the road easier and smoother to travel on. This helps to make allies of our road users to win over their confidence when we look to perform other upgrades to reduce sedimentation. Making the road smooth is just the first step. There's a lot of other things that can and should be done. The 3 most important rules to remember when designing and building a road, much like real estate. Drainage, get the water off the surface of the road. 2, keep the water out of the base of the road. 3, drainage, get the water safely away from the road. Because water is the enemy of the road. This is another mile-long road here in Madison. This was the first spring that they tried to keep this road open through the spring, and needless to say, it took some work to get the people in and out of there. It took a lot of crushed stone is what it took, and I'll show pictures of that later. Not this particular road, but that's what we ended up doing with it to make it passable. Okay, a road should be like a house. strong foundation to provide support, and a roof to shed water to keep the inside dry. It's a great analogy. How strong should it be? One of these trucks can equal 10,000 cars. That truck probably weighs 80,000. Figure what that does to the road versus, you know, a whole bunch of cars. The road base should be a mix of sand and rock for strength and a minimum of fines for drainage so that water drains out if it does get in there or doesn't get in there, and capillary up. Capillary action is what pulls the water up to the surface a lot of the time. Springtime is a different issue, and if any of you listened to Sam Evans-Brown when he interviewed me a year ago during mud season about why roads get muddy in the spring, we talked about that, and why the water stays in the road, because it can't get out because of the lens of ice underneath. So the water just sits in the road and makes the road surface muddy. Whereas other times of the year, the road might not be nearly as muddy, even with the heavy rain. Most of us are stuck with whatever the road base is. We're not going to change that. I was working on a road this week, and I started pulling rocks out of it, and then I started pulling more and more rocks. I said, wait a minute, this is what this road is made out of. I don't want to pull the rocks out. We've got to add finished gravel over the top to make a good wear surface. So road surface materials is what we're going to talk about. And that should be lots of small aggregate stones that will provide strength with a shape that will lock stones together to support wheels, and sufficient fines, the binder that will lock the stones together to keep the stones from moving around. Much like cement. When you mix cement, you have stone, you have sand, and you have the cement. And it's the fines that provide this cement in this case. Let's look at the difference between crushed bank run gravel and the other things that are used to. In the old days, well, in the older days, the oldest days, when we had screens, that you would screen bank run gravel, and you'd end up with taking the big rocks out and using the smaller rocks as some of the road material. Then we started crushing bank run gravel. That was a step up. But in more recent years, we switched to a ledge pack, also called a hard pack, which is actually busted ledge. They blow the ledge. I can hear it from my house. I'm fairly close to the pit here in the Conway area. Conway, Madison, and Albany come together. We're in Albany right now here. They dynamite this stuff, break it up, and then break it into smaller pieces. And this is the quarry, Coleman's Quarry here in town. And then it's busted down to smaller sizes to produce an aggregate. This is what I use on most of my roads. And besides producing an aggregate that is uniform in size and occasionally in content of fines versus stone, which is critical, this process makes a stone that is much more angular than that made from just screening bank run gravel. As in the right-hand side here, the angular stuff has a tendency to lock together, which is the reason why somebody asked me at one of the Lakes meetings about knit pack. What the hell is knit pack? And it occurred to me a minute later that knit was spelled with a K. K-N-I-T, knit. The stuff is angular, so it knits together. That apparently is a local, maybe somebody else has heard that that's listening tonight. I'd never heard it before or since, but the concept makes sense. Okay, so that would be ledge pack or hard pack, what it's called in a lot of cases. I heard of a quin pack from down the southern part of the state. It's basically busted ledge. Rotten rock is a traditional surfacing material. The Forest Service used it widely throughout the National Forest up here. It packs hard, but it breaks down under heavy traffic because it is actually decomposing rock. It continues to break down. We used it for years up here. Very often when I'm working on a driveway now, if I'll scrape it down a little bit, I'll get into the rotten rock that was put in underneath. Now, recycled asphalt pavement has gotten popular in places. I warn people about it because pavement is made of clean, 3/4 and smaller material with no fines. Hot asphalt provides the glue that holds it together instead of fines. Asphalt starts at the plant at 360 degrees and is laid down by the paving machine at 275 degrees. It ain't never going to get that hot in the sun. Well, if it does, we're in deeper trouble than we are already. This material works well for low volume flat areas or as a base material. Usually it does not pack unless somebody has taken the trouble to add some fines to it, because what held it together originally was the asphalt, and that asphalt, some of it is probably outgassed or washed away or whatever. So it's not going to, in some cases I've heard that it does knit together and rebond fairly well, but for the most part it doesn't. So I keep away from it. Recycled concrete, I've tried it. I didn't care for it. Again, it didn't seem to have enough fines to hold it together. The fines are critical because dirty gravel will pack, though it won't drain, which is important in this. We'll look at it in a minute. And clean gravel drains, but it does not pack. The clean gravel wants to be the road base, and the dirty gravel wants to be the surface. Now, here's a trick question. Does an unpaved road return more water to the ground than a paved road? Anybody want to venture a guess? I didn't think so. A proper combination of correctly sized broken rock, sand, silts, and clays will produce a road surface that hardens into a strong and stable crust that forms a reasonably impervious roof to our road. This is a sample I picked up just yesterday out of my stockpile of 3/4 crushed gravel at my house. This is just a lump, a 3/4 ledge pack. I set it up on the steps and put that rock on top of it. This shows you how strong that stuff is, and this hasn't really been compacted by a vibratory roller or anything. It has just dried out as a lump. It is strong. It's very strong, and it's also very impervious. So good gravel shouldn't let any more water through the surface of a road than pavement does. People think that they're letting water back into the aquifer through the road by keeping it gravel. It ain't necessarily so, because that road should shed just as well as if it were pavement. Okay, final tip on gravel here. What is gravel? Architects and engineers call it one thing. Those of us in the dump trucks usually call it something else. For our purposes here, gravel is a mix of stones, sand, and fines. Crushed stone is washed and graded stone only. When we call for one material or the other, we ask for either crushed stone or crushed gravel. I know our local pit has had to send a loader out with a dump truck on occasion to reload material because somebody ordered the wrong thing. I asked an architect how he explains this to people. He says very carefully because it's very easy to get mixed up. Okay, the optimum gravel for most road surfaces is 3/4 inch or 1 inch minus, which means the largest aggregate is either 3/4 or an inch, and the mix contains every size below that includes sand, silts, and clays. Those are the fines that bind it together. This is what that 3/4 crushed gravel looks like with all of the fines washed out of it. That's the biggest aggregate there, and then the smaller aggregate, and then I've washed the fines out of it so you can actually see what the pieces are. It's not unlike mixing concrete. Let's look at road surface problems, the causes, and how we fix them. Potholes, big one. They're the result of water and traffic on a flat road surface. What do we try to do? We try to scrape material into the pothole. What happens? We never get that material compacted well enough in that pothole, and when the cars go over it, they compact that, and the water settles in there, and the pothole comes right back as big as it was before. The proper way to get rid of potholes is to cut to the bottom of them. If you follow any program about working on gravel roads, you will hear cut out the potholes. That's a good rule. However, it doesn't work for a lot of us because a lot of us don't have enough processed aggregate on the top of the road to be able to cut to the bottom of it. If we tried to cut to the bottom of the pothole sometime, we'd be digging out 4, 5, 6 inch stones that we would end up losing off the side of the road. So what I've told people is sometimes do this in a gradual method. Cut them a little bit, let them get compacted by the traffic, then cut again. After 2 or 3 visits, particularly with the front runner like I showed you, or a grader or whatever, your box blade, whatever you're using, you will get those potholes filled to the point where they'll be solid enough that they won't come back. If you get just a few potholes in a road, it's okay to fill them, but you want to overfill them, just like a auto body guy overfills the dents in a car and then smooths it off. So then you compact the gravel with the vehicle that's hauling it, or let the traffic compact it. a bump caused by that overfilled pothole will not get larger as a pothole will when it fills with water. Washouts occur on hills, lousy surface material, inadequate pitch to get water off to the sides. Now, the water can run down the hill, but we don't want it to run down the hill. We want it to run to the sides of the hill. We'll look at that in a moment. And it can also be caused, and is often caused, by wheel ruts caused by cars driving in the same place every time. If you look closely here, you'll see where this was probably one wheel track that wore in a little bit. You see the other one just beginning like this. In time, that'll look like this, and this will look like, they'll both end up looking like this. This is just wheel ruts that have caused erosion. This was on one of those mile-long driveways in Madison to Whitten Pond. I fixed this without even adding any gravel to it. I just graded out what was there, and it's held up for quite a few years, but it lost a lot of material, and you know that the fines that were in that went into suspension and probably found their way to the pond. The simple fix to this is regular maintenance, the first sign of wheel tracks starting to turn into ruts, especially on hills. Also, and this is the hardest thing you're going to try to do, take away from this thing tonight, try to get folks to drive all over the road instead of in the same ruts all the time. Now, Stu's situation is a little different than most. His driveway is really a road, and it's plenty wide, so you don't end up driving in the same place. But many of the driveways that I work on around Squam Lake and these places, they're just narrow enough that the cars stay right dead center in the road, and they end up with these two wheel ruts on a hill, and that's what begins to wash out. And it's a headache for me to repair them because I have to really cut to the bottom of that, all the way down to the bottom of that rut, which, as I'm saying, at times puts me down into the road base, which is stonier than I want to be getting into. So I really prefer to be able to take care of this just as it's beginning to happen. Okay, the technique we use to get water off the surface of the road is to slope the surface of the road to one side or the other so that water cannot sit on the road or sink into it. We can slope it all to one side or slope it to both sides. Sloping it to both sides is called a crown, where water is forced from the surface of the road to the ditch line, if there is one, on each side of the road. Doesn't a crown usually look like this? Well, yeah, it usually does. But that's a problem because that rounded crown on a lot of roads that are wide enough for two vehicles to pass without having to pull off into the pucker brush, usually the wheel towards the center of the road rides right on the crown. So the wheels going that way and the wheels coming this way are right there. And what's the problem with that spot? It's the flattest part of the road. So what you'll see is this. And if you begin to look at your roads now, and if your roads have a rounded crown, the chances are you'll have a row of potholes right down the middle of the road. This is a road that had good pitch on this side, but too flat on this side. And it's plenty easy to see the difference. Eventually we got this side sloped and it hasn't potholes as badly. How much slope should there be for a proper crown? I have a laser level that I paid a lot of money for back in 1988 when they first came out. I don't use it on a road. I use a carpenter's level and a stick to get the level of the road. We're looking for a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch per foot. If you use a level, you can figure out how much it's going to be over 10 feet. I actually have, I don't think I have a picture of it here. It's in the book, a grade gauge on my tractor that tells me what percentage I am. Each percent is about 1/8 of an inch is the way it works out. I'm looking for 4%, typically 4 to 5% grade on that road so that the water cannot sit here anyplace. A dirt road has to be graded with much more pitch than a paved road. Pavement will stay put. A car spinning its wheels, turning. At one instance, up by Hart's location, about a mile-long road, and the only pothole in it was right in front of a fireman's driveway. Okay, he'd back out of the driveway, hit the throttle and spin, and that would cause a pothole. That's all it takes to get it going, just that little bit of a hole. So the steeper this is, the more of a hole it will tolerate before it becomes a pot. Yeah, the more of a depression it will tolerate before it becomes a pothole. How often should a road be graded? Well, this is like last week when we saw how often should a septic tank be pumped. It depends. Totally on conditions, rainfall, sometimes a lack of it. There's no set rule for how often. I've had people ask me, how many times should I grade? I don't know. I could grade it tomorrow and it could blow out the next day with a heavy rain. Even the best situation, sometimes in some of these torrential rains, we'll get washing, and you want to be able to take care of that right away. Ideal conditions for grading: springtime after most frost has left the road, but may still be soft. The front runner I use on my truck and my tractor helps to dry out a road if it's too wet. Late spring or summer after a road is fully stable, but just after a rain, like tomorrow, I may be out doing some road touch up because of the little bit of rain we had today. I think maybe a quarter to a half an inch. Stay off the road when it's too dry. It takes a lot of extra effort to grade it if it's possible at all, and the road material will not repack. If it's good packing material and it's too dry, it'll be like cornstarch. You just can't pack it until it has some moisture in it, and it'll be excessively dusty. When it's too wet, it's possible to make more soup than already exists. Now, when we have a road that's too wet, typically in the spring, I get calls from people that their driveway is muddy. I'll go out with a load of stone and I'll put it in and drive it down into the mud. I've got a short video on YouTube of one of Coleman's trucks delivering stone to us a couple of years ago on a real muddy section of road. And a development that I'd taken care of I think it was the first one I ever took on. And I've done it for like 25 years. This is the first time that section of road actually got muddy. It's like playing whack-a-mole. This will happen this year. It'll happen that year. You never know. It's a function of rain and traffic and sun and who cut the trees down and when the leaves left. That's so many different things. We spread stone on that road and people were able to drive out of it. I've had people tell me I should have done it 5 or 6 different ways, but I say none of them were there when we did this, and this actually worked. This is using probably 1.5 inch stone is what I'm showing there. It's stronger. It will provide more support. If it's a situation where you can wait until later in the year and you want to be sure that you've got a road that's going to hold up, use a geotextile. I can't hand out samples of them here, but suffice it to say, these geotextiles come in a roll 15 or 17 feet wide or 12 feet wide also. They look just like the silt fence that you see around a construction site. What they do is provide, we put this down and then the trucks back over it and dump the gravel, then we spread it over the top. They keep the gravel on top from being pushed down into the soil underneath, compensating for a poor road base. So if you've got a lousy road base, geotextile can be a very inexpensive way of solving that problem without having to dig up the road. Geotextiles cost them the price of the equivalent amount of gravel to get the same effect. The cost of hauling the gravel or the cost of spreading the gravel. According to one report, a layer of geotextile costs about the same as 1 inch of gravel. I don't know that that's still true, but gravel's gone up and geotextile's gone up, so it's probably still true. Subsurface drains, I do these. This is a private driveway in the Rock House development. I did this several years ago. We put in a drain pipe there. The water is moving from uphill to downhill this way. So this pipe 3 feet, 4 feet below the surface is picking up that water and sending it out into the road culvert to dewater that driveway. This is another method different than the geotextile. There it is there. There's actually a geotextile filter fabric over the top, stone around the pipe, and then this geotextile and clean sand over that to soak up the water. Okay, some maintenance tips. Trees. They help to keep a road moist, which is a good thing. But leaf buildup on a road can make it harder to maintain and lead to washouts in the traveled way as water flows around them. I talked to the road commissioner in Idlewild today, and he used my leaf blower a couple of years in a row, but hasn't the last couple of years. because we get snowed out too early 2 years ago. Um, all you need is a branch across a ditch with the leaves piling up against that. The water will go out around that and take out the shoulder of the road, or more, depending on it. It's just like building a beaver dam. So we try to keep the leaves out of the ditches. This is a road, I'm not going to say what town it was, but I think they tried to grade without getting rid of the leaves, and they got pretty much of a mess. There were blobs of leaves mixed up with gravel and all. A simple blower. I've got backpack blowers. I've got an electric blower, battery powered, that I keep in the truck. But I also have, and there's a video of that online, a 22 horsepower diesel tractor with a PTO mounted blower, and I have an 18 horsepower gas blower that I put on the front of the tractor so I can make 2 passes at once when I'm clearing leaves, because I try to get all the leaves off of the developments before we get snow. Sometimes you're playing footsie with the snow because the snow will come before the leaves are shed. And then you end up with, in the spring, you end up with the leaves in the ditch with winter sand all over them. And sometimes some of the gravel that had been scraped off the road by the snowplow. So get rid of the leaves. Another thing is greater berms. And this seems to happen with every road maintenance system ends up with a greater berm. I've tried to eliminate them. You have to work at it, but this is a greater berm here. This is the road, but look where the water's going. It's supposed to be over here in the ditch, but it's not. It's running down the shoulder here. I think this is the Rock House development. When I took over the roads, I had to start pulling in all these ditches to rebuild the road to a crown. The same thing happens with either gravel or ice. And this is becoming more and more of a problem as we get winter storms that freeze down on the road, and you get a layer of ice that the water can't get to the ditch. There is a ditch out behind here, but the water could not get down on that ditch, so it's taken the shoulder of the road out. Very common. You very often see this in the spring. You'll see, why is that water washed down through there after the snow is all melted? And you realize, oh yeah, the snow used to be all the way over here, and there was an ice underneath it and the water couldn't get off, so it washes this out. I actually, in the Rock House development and 1 or 2 other places, I will go in with my bucket with some teeth on it and scrape some paths through every so often for the water to get off the road when I know the heavy rain is coming and that ice dam is still there. It's preventative maintenance. The better the water, it's a ditch in time. That's the name of my book here. It just gets the water off more often rather than let it build up with volume and velocity as it's going down any grade and taking the road with it. This happened in Cranmore Shores several years ago. There is a ditch out behind here, but the water couldn't get to it. It jumped it and went across, and I got it working with the truck with the front runner. Breaking ice dams, sometimes if I've been in a tough situation, again, I think this was Cranmore Shores, I broke this with just a bar and a shovel to get the water off the road because I knew there was a culvert in behind there. And it's a labor of love, but it's important. This is one of my favorite ones. This is a snowplow, a trip edge type snowplow. Your Fisher plows, your Diamond plows, now your Boss plows are trip edge plows, which means when they start to catch into something, the plow trip edge pulls back and then it resets itself. Well, as it's digging in, it makes these marks all along here. And it's very common to see in the spring when we've had a late winter snowstorm and the plow contractor has had to plow after the road is softened up, because the roads do get much softer in the spring than they are in the fall. I've come up with a solution for this. We plow with a front runner, and I have many towns that do this, and this is one of their favorite ways of using the front runner is getting rid of spring snows, because you'll see how it's cleaned up here. It leaves a little bit of gravel behind, but it gets rid of most of the snow. This is another situation that happens on many, if not most, roads, and it's caused by lack of fines, lack of good locking stone, and lack of moisture. It's a washboard. I noticed today the town of Conway regraded one of the roads that was getting real bad. I hope they put some calcium chloride on it. We'll look at that in a minute. So the only way to get rid of that is to regrade that and have good gravel that will pack and add calcium chloride. That's the ultimate. Calcium chloride or magnesium chloride will, in moderate amounts, will settle dust. In heavy amounts, it will also harden the road surface to save on maintenance. Idlewise has just done this. I talking with the fellows in there the other day. They do it themselves. They have an applicator, the same applicator they use for brining the roads in the winter for ice removal. They use to put the calcium chloride down. The calcium chloride sucks in water and it holds it. And when I was doing these workshops over in Maine, I was told that in northern Maine, the roads are so hard that the kids are burning rubber on the dirt roads. And the calcium chloride tends to stay put. I have it on my own driveway, and on a humid day, you can see that the spots where I've put in the calcium chloride the heaviest. You can use a flake like we've done here. We just poured this out of the bag essentially, and then raked it with a plastic rake, not a steel rake. This stuff is incredibly corrosive, unfortunately. It's probably what has taken 25 years off of my truck. So you don't want to wear leather when you use it either. But it tends to stay in the soil. Once it goes into the soil, it tends to stay in the soil. So it doesn't have many detrimental effects. It's very helpful. This is the other way it's applied, directly out of a truck. It can be done in. It's set up to meter out a certain amount of calcium chloride. This is done as a liquid here. And the calcium chloride is mixed with it feels almost greasy when you feel it. Because it actually, even though it's going down with water, it'll suck in more water as it's sucking that water in, and it helps to bind the surface of that road. Another thing we want to point out here is water turnouts. New England, it's hard. Out in the Midwest, out in Montana, I don't think they have to worry about them. The roads are so wide and they're flat in a lot of places, but they're a problem for us. A water turnout is a hole through whatever is obstructing flow at the side of the road. They're used to get water away from the road. A greater berm or a stone wall, be particularly careful of a stone wall because they have a lot of legal standing here in New Hampshire and probably everywhere in New England. But they are basically a hole through the wall that carries, that you turn the water away. The more you have, the better, because you get rid of water before it builds up volume and velocity going down the hill. You want to keep them away from water bodies as far as possible so the silt that's carried can be deposited before it reaches water. The main road camp roads manual talks quite a bit about these. There's a link to that in my Ditch in Time. Okay, paving as an alternative. On the steepest hills, yeah, makes good sense. Roads must be ready because paving is, well, you want it to be final. You want a strong, well-drained base, and you want adequate drainage away. If you don't, this is what can happen. And this is my favorite one. And I drove by that today and took a picture. That's also in Madison. And what are you laughing at, Crystal? Yeah, that was somebody's driveway. I got a call from the paver. He wasn't sure what to do, but when I drove by it today, this area had been dug up and patched. Apparently, they got rid of the rocks that were on. I don't know exactly what happened, but it was a blowout. They'd have been better off with a good gravel driveway that they could have graded. You can't grade pavement. Once it begins to alligator and crack, it's money wasted. This is in one of my developments. I won't say which one, but there was this little thing sticking out right here, and I said, well, let me dig that out. Well, this is what I dug out. This would pretty much fill up the back of my truck. It's a stump. It was under the road. Well, one of the ladies in the development wants to pave the roads. I said, we ain't going to pave these roads until we know that none of these booby traps lie beneath the road because they're just going to cause problems. If it's a problem on a dirt road, we can fix it pretty easily. If it's a problem on a paved road, it's a problem. Okay, in the back of my Ditch in Time book, there are some quick tips, a lot of things you can do to take care of a road that don't cost anything. Watching the water drainage pattern, keeping culvert inlets and outlets clear of roots. This was a culvert here in Freedom years ago. They got a branch across it, the leaves piled up against it, and it took the road out. Water bars, I put a lot of them in the roads for water control. You want to make sure that they stay shaped so that they can get rid of the water. Water turnouts, we've talked about them. You want to get rid of them. By the way, this presentation tonight is about a third of what I normally present when I'm doing a Saturday workshop, a full workshop. We cut out a lot of slides. There's a lot more information, much of which is in the Ditch in Time that's available free online. And as we wrap it up here, there's the impact of increased development on existing road systems. There are fewer places to safely dispose of the water. There's more water to dispose of. Every time I see another house go up in Rock House, I say, oh, where's that water going to go? There ought to be an infrastructure fee charged to enlarge the culverts downstream every time one of these houses goes in. And there's more traffic. And this is a startling fact. 1 inch of rain on 1 acre, over 27,000 gallons of water. Roofs and blacktops drive the and blacktop driveways heat up in the sun and then transfer heat to the rainwater. And fish don't like hot water apparently, unless they're getting ready to be eaten. There's the state of Maine has a very good Guide to Forming Roads Association. There's a link in Ditch in Time, or you can look it up from the Maine DEP. It's a fairly thick comic book size thing with a lot of information about how to successfully go about forming a road association for those of you who might have roads. Apparently you do, or they wouldn't be here. I'll point out this organization. The technology transfer centers exist in every state and every territory from Maine to Guam. They share information on how to take care of roads, and if they find something that's particularly pertinent to their situation, they will publish it in their monthly newsletter. It's very, very helpful. There's great information. I've not been able to work very closely with them, unfortunately. They have their way of going about things, and they're not typically taking care of the type of roads that I am, that don't have any gravel on them to maintain, don't have a good ditch system or any of those things. So they're usually working with a better road, not in every situation, but usually they're working on roads that are a little bit easier to maintain. The road steward, every road should have a steward. If you're the only one on the road, you're the steward. Knowing what to do, take action when something is wrong, or to notify the person, and the person doesn't have to do it themselves. They could be wheelchair bound, but look and say, we got a culvert that needs something. Push the button on my phone. This is going to be taken care of because it's going to rain like hell tonight. That can solve a lot of problems. Again, it's the concept of a ditch in time. You do some of these things before they get to be a problem, and you can save a lot of wear and tear. This again is the front runner. I'd love to talk with somebody that would like to get that back into production because the thing works. Now, finally, we're going to talk about this, and this came to me as I was driving through. Actually, it was a development in Madison. Years ago, I saw a road grader tearing the road up. And I said, good, they're going to grade this finally. I went back to find the next spring, and the road was as full of potholes as it ever was. So it prompted me to do this. I think that I will never see a dirt road shaped as it should be, not graded flat the way some do, or rutted like a W, nor rounded like a baby's rear, but pointed like a Martian's ear. To keep the surface of the road from looking like a horny toad with bumps and craters on its back and slippery mud due to a lack of drainage, shaped so it can't shed all water off its back instead. The trouble with a rounded road is that it's flattest, where the load is double that of either side, because it's where more tires ride, because cars both going to and fro crowd towards the middle, don't you know? New England dirt roads narrow be, from ditch to wall and rock to tree. The simple rule to keep your road from looking like that horny toad, just make it look like letter A, and you will find that it will stay as smooth as that new baby's ass because it's shaped so it can last. Okay, this is what my website looks like. Oh, we got it done in less than 45 minutes with this. Lots of time for questions. And I don't want a question that starts out with, my neighbor did this.
Okay. That was some beautiful poetry. Thank you so
Oh,
much
thank
for
you.
sharing.
Thank you.
Russ, thank you. That was awesome. Every time I see this, it's been a couple years. Thank you. That was fantastic. And Crystal and Jessica have just been doing a rock star job manning the chat box. Some pretty technical questions in there, and also putting up a few resources for folks. So I'm going to turn this over to Crystal and Jessica to facilitate a question and answer session. We've got about 15 minutes. And again, for folks that need to sign off soon, this presentation, the slides and the recording will be posted on our website tomorrow. And you'll also receive an email tomorrow morning with all the links. So, all right, Crystal and Jessica, take it away.
And most of the information is on my website in this Ditch in Time manual. That's what almost all of this information is from. I'll also point out at this point that there's another book on there about keeping your home's feet dry. All the years I've tried to dry out people's wet basements has led to this, to try and help folks to see their way through keeping the water out of their basement. That's also free on the website. So over to you.
Okay, well, we've got some pretty technical, pretty highly specific questions in the chat
I figured
box.
that.
So if you're ready, one question is, what is the best rake technique to crown the road? Do you angle the rake? Do you lower one side of the rake? A combination of both?
Yes. Next.
A combination of both?
Next. Yes. It's in the book. It's in the book. Yes, it's exactly what you do. The front runner is set up to be able to do that. You can do it with a tow behind, or not a tow behind, but a 3-point hitch rake also. But any attachment that's on the back, I've always considered is there for smoothing. It's not there for grading. When you're grading, you want to have the tool in front of you, just like the blade on a bulldozer or the blade on a grader is in front of the operator, so you can see what he's doing. But yes, by lowering it on one side and angling it to the center, that's how I achieve crown. And I will give you a tip. And I learned this not from grader training school at UNH, but when I was doing a program over in Maine, one of the participants said, yeah, we start by going down the middle of the road. And I said, what? I said, I always start by going down the edge. But I realized what he was doing. The potholes were down the middle of the road. So you scrape out those potholes in the middle of the road first, and then you pull in your shoulders. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was unanimous.
There was a second part of that question asking specifically how you pull the the pack that's pushed to the side of the road. How do you actually pull the shoulders in when you're grading?
Well, we can do it just as we talked about just now by angling the front runner in. Sometimes in extreme situations, I'll go through with the bucket, and sometimes I'll just get, if there's not too deep a ditch, I'll actually set one wheel right in the ditch and scrape that berm off and push it out into the road, and then work it out with the front runner. But it depends on the situation. It depends on the material. Sometimes that material is not worth pulling in. Keep in mind, if you have material like at the bottom of a hill that has washed down, you can't put that back on the road as road surface, because the fines that were a part of that are now in the Saco River or the what's that big one in the middle of the state? Anyway, the fines wash out. And if there's stuff to the side of a lot of stuff to the side, a lot of that can be winter sand and leaves. So you got to be really careful when you try and reclaim that. But if it is decent gravel, you can, and I tried a trick with my backhoe recently. I actually have a blade that I put right on the bucket of my backhoe, and I swing the backhoe off to the side, and I chain the bucket to the back of the tractor so I'm not putting a strain on it. And I can drive along and pull that shoulder in just the same as if I had a 3-point hitch grader blade on the back, and it worked slick. I did a driveway in Sandwich last fall that way. I thought I was going to spend hours and hours, and I managed to do it in a fraction of the time. The shoulders were almost a foot higher than the road, and I pulled all that material in with just by chaining the backhoe to the tractor. I think I've got a video online of that somewhere too.
Wow.
That help? That help?
I think so. Another question is specifically about shore pack. That sounds like it's, you know, a type of gravel.
It's another local name.
Shore pack. So is that the mixture of gravel with fines that folks are looking for?
If it says pack on it, that should be what it's for. It's a mixture of the sand, silts, and clays and aggregate stone to make it pack. Again, I mean, you go across the country and you're going to find all kinds of different names for this stuff. Some of them are based on who's producing it. Like we have a new one here in Conway being produced by the Burke brothers, and they call it Burke Pack. It happens to be nice and blue. It has quite a bit of binder in it. It makes a very much dressier road. It's a little more expensive, but they call it Burke Pack. So
okay.
So I'm sure that's what Sure Pack is. It's just a Sure is probably not the name of the company, but it's just something somebody has nicknamed it.
Mm-hmm. The next question is interesting because I've lived on a dirt road my entire life, and over the course of that, I've always kind of felt like I was seeing the road agent put down material more often than we should be putting down material. So Kim asked a great question. How long should a half-inch coat of ledge pack last if it's been rolled by a vibrating roller? When should they expect to have to, add to that?
10 minutes in a snowstorm.
Interesting.
Seriously, one careless pass on a snowstorm on a soft road will peel that right off into the ditch. If it's been well compacted, and wheels can compact. What I learned in Maine was that wheels can compact up to 4 inches. A vibratory roller will compact up to 8 inches. So if you're only putting an inch or two on there and you're rolling it, especially if it has some moisture in it, it should last a good long time. But this is, it's like how long is a road? How deep is a hole? How do you answer something like this? Because there are so many variables. How steep is it? What's underneath it? How much traffic is it? It's pretty difficult to answer.
Okay.
That's why there's a lot of art to this science.
There's always an art to soil science, I've learned.
Yeah. Sid told you that probably, huh?
He certainly did. He would sit on the bed of his truck from 20 feet away and have us dig a brand new pit in the middle of a field, and then he would guess what the YR was of it. And be like,
yep.
That's what I was going to say. Anyways, we're getting too nerdy. Back to the questions. So you showed a picture earlier and you talked momentarily about stumps being found underneath the road.
Yeah.
So when stumps appear, should people remove them?
Well, that particular stump didn't grow there. That one was completely cut off. It looked like that was somebody pushed it. There must have been a hole and somebody pushed it into the hole. That was a good one to get rid of. If the road is built over stumps, don't fret. Put down the geotextile and 6 to 8 inches of crushed gravel over the top, and you've got a good road. It's incredible what this has allowed us to do in some pretty marginal areas. So, again, there's too many variables here. But if the tree was just cut off, flush to the road, you're going to make a mess digging that whole thing out. If it's the only one, maybe you want to get rid of it. But if the whole road is nothing but stumps underneath, put your filter fabric or your geotextile over the top and good gravel over the top of that, and you probably have a good road.
Okay.
It's changed everything. 25 years ago, a guy said, yeah, what's this stuff do? The railroad started it first. And anything the railroad does, you can be pretty sure they've thought it through because they don't do things twice. they're the ones that started with this.
Well, it's good stuff. I've definitely seen some dirt roads where it's very, very obvious. You're right. It really does pack like concrete
Yep.
when it's being
Yep.
done well with the right material. But of course, as you mentioned earlier, a well-packed, properly packed dirt road will also shed water. Who's responsible for the water that sheds off the road if a road is designed or graded in a specific way and it's shedding a lot of water, off of the road and then maybe channelizing it, somewhere like perhaps a property owner's property?
It depends on the judge.
Okay.
I asked this question when I was doing a presentation for the Lakes Region Planning Commission. I said, who's responsible for this sort of thing? And one of the guys piped right up. He said, that's going to depend on, on it going to court, one person making an issue out of it. There's so many factors. That's why I said at the beginning, I said, don't tell me that your neighbor did this. Because it's pretty hard to determine that. There may be some rules that came over from the old country, generally speaking, but for the most part, it's when you develop a piece of property now, probably in most towns, you're not supposed to send your stormwater onto your neighbor's property. Does that mean you send it? You put if you go by the Walmart up here, there's a huge storm drain pool out behind the Walmart for all of that stormwater that comes off of the pavement. One of the driveways I take care of, there's a huge stormwater pool that the engineer who I work with a lot designed to be able to accommodate all the stormwater coming off of that because the neighbors didn't want his stormwater coming onto or across their property. So I think towns are much more aware of that now. We're trying to deal in Rock House, we're trying to deal with the water that's coming off of the roads up there and getting into, I should have thrown a couple of those slides in of like an acre or two of brown water after a heavy rain a couple of summers ago. We're trying to come up with a retention pond to catch that stuff that's going in there. A lot of which is winter sand, which they need because it's so steep in there and everybody wants to be able to drive like they did in Boston. So, they have to sand like crazy and that sand washes off into the ditches and then the rain carries the fines in the sand on down to the Big Pea Porridge Pond. So did that make any sense?
Yeah, it did.
Unfortunately.
So I know that we are quickly running out of time here. I have two questions.
Okay.
One is for pre-existing roads, whether they're, private lake roads that aren't being maintained by the town, or maybe the town is maintaining them, but not terribly well. Or if you have a private driveway, a long dirt driveway, we see roads, we see driveways essentially being built through wetlands. And so, you've got a wetland on either side of it, and you almost always start to end up with a sinkhole in that portion of the road. What do you recommend for
Geotextile?
Geotextile? Just put geotextile down and work on.
Geotextile. They say you can roll geotextile across a swamp and put gravel on it, and you got a road.
Okay.
I'm not sure I'd try it. I'd probably go to jail anyway in this state. But that's the rule. If you've got a real wet spot, you put the geotextile on it, and it helps to keep the stuff on top from pushing down in.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and just to clarify, we're not saying putting geotextile in the wetland. It's only on the road for everybody.
Well, if you're building it through a wetland, in the first place, I'm not sure how you get a permit to do that. But if you're going through a fairly wet area, and there are a lot of areas that are pretty wet and pretty boggy that are not really wetlands, they're just pretty wet in the spring, and that's where you want to use the geotextile. Mm-hmm. And those are available at local farm supply places, and we used to figure they would cost about a buck a lineal foot, which is pretty cheap, and they do a real good job.
Mm-hmm. All right, we've got a couple more questions coming in.
I'm in no hurry, so.
So I know that it's almost 8, so if people want to stick around for a couple more, we've got some good ones. Yeah, I'm getting the thumbs up from Andrea. Winston, I see your hand. If you got a question, do you want to submit it through the chat box, and then I can ask Russ? Okay, so this is a really good question. So if there are no road experts in a community, or perhaps one that claim that they're a road expert, but maybe doing a disagreeable job or not using best management practices, how can one go about making a good argument for implementing these best management practices for the road management? You know, a lot of towns are still using the graders that you know, are behind the tractor. A lot of towns are putting down road base aggregate that's just, you know, not real. They dump sand down and things like that. And I know a lot of people are dealing with this. I know that I was personally dealing with it when I lived in the next town over. So what can people do, either with their vote or what have you, to help the town out with a situation like that?
Well, okay. On one hand, I would recommend, if it's a municipal issue, I would recommend that your DEP people take part in the technology transfer centers programs. They do programs on everything from flagging to health insurance, to running a chainsaw, to running a grader. And a lot of guys, I shouldn't say guys, and some of the gals, take these, and eventually they become a roads scholar. And it's very inexpensive. It's again, this is stuff that's done nationally. So that is the way. Now, on the private sector, that's a lot more complicated, because a lot of people do it the way Grandpa did, and they ain't gonna put none of this geotextile down. They probably wouldn't even know what it was. So then I guess it's just a question of ferreting out some good information and say, gee, this has worked pretty good for that town over there. Could you take a ride over there and see what their roads look like? And maybe we could do some of the same things here. I don't know. It's really, you know, that is really politics at its best to try and pull that, to pull that off. It's difficult. But I know what you're saying, and you know, we watch guys around here all the time that are doing driveways, and the fellow who's taken over most of my road work as I try to retire. I tell people I'm down to half days, just 12 hours. He says he sees guys all the time that are just grading roads flat, just flat. I see them all the time. They're just making them flat. And you know, how much understanding does it take to know that flat is going to pothole, it's going to wash, it's going to do all those things? You've got to build a crown. So I don't know, if you can't get that far with somebody, I don't know where you can get to the next square, because there are a lot of other steps beyond just keeping the road surface in place. You want to start talking about buffers and water turnouts and all those kinds of things to pick up the silt because silt will wash off a road. You cannot stop raindrop erosion, sheet erosion. The road is going to wash in a heavy rain. You want to be able to trap that stuff somewhere. That's the next step. And if you can't get to the first square, how the hell are you going to get to the next one? So you just have to keep pointing this out. I'm not much help.
Well, you know, it sounds like maybe forming a road association can help.
Yes.
But you know, with private roads and road associations, obviously maintenance and material costs money. So how do you get your neighbors to contribute to these kinds of projects? How can neighbors be having these conversations and convincing one another to, you know, cough up some matching funds so that everybody can go in on the price to, you know, maybe upgrade a poorly designed road to something that's going to be better and easier to maintain?
I have found that once you begin to show people that we can make some progress here and get rid of the potholes and things, then their purse strings will loosen up. The experience that many people have had is that they've put good money after bad, and you know, they spent money on stuff, it's washed right away. I mean, this one, that the driveway I showed you at the beginning that was 1,600 feet long, they spent $16,000 on the first 4 years on that driveway to try and keep it in place. Ironically, everything that washed out washed into the driveway of the person or the yard of the person down below who happened to be, used to work for the Soil Conservation Service as a district conservationist. I reclaimed some of that material. I rebuilt that whole road for like $1,500 and it has never washed out in 20 years. We add some more gravel to it, but I got a crown on it. That's all it took.
That's all it needed, huh?
Yeah, that's all it needed. So if you can show people that you can make some progress, then sometimes you can get the purse strings to loosen up. But if they've just been chucking out money, and people do spend money for gravel, and that's one of the biggest, and that's why I spend so much time explaining what is good gravel, because people will spend the money on gravel and it's wasted.
Well, speaking of, choosing the right material and then crowning it right, Winston Sims wants to comment and say that their private road has been very well served by crushed macadam. I hope I'm pronouncing that. Macadam, not even close. I tried. Winston says it goes down quickly and lasts for years.
How much grade is there?
Hey, Winston, how much grade is there?
That's not Winston.
If you know, tell me in the chat box.
Remember what I said, recycle macadam, recycle pavement. If the people that did the recycling knew to add binder to it, there's no reason it shouldn't last as well as anything else. But if they didn't, it's not gonna bind down. Now, my brother told me years ago that his was great in his driveway. Well, yeah, your driveway's flat. Yeah, we don't have flat driveways up here. We got hills. So it makes a big difference. I've used it once. I've used it just once on a driveway that was perfectly flat, and I happened to be directly across the street from the pit where the stuff was being made. So I think the guy carried it over in a loader and dumped it there for me. But I will not use it on a hill. I had a very bad experience with it years ago. A local machine shop they were told that this was going to be the end all and be all. That driveway was so incredibly dusty. And what I've found with that material is that because it's a bituminous coated, it doesn't seem to want to pick up moisture very well. So it can remain dustier than regular gravel at times, because I've watched the water, running water over it, and the water just doesn't stick to it because of the coating of asphalt. So I don't know what it looks like. If I saw a sample, I'd say, oh yeah, they've added binder to this. That's why it works. Either that or you got a flat road, in which case it's not an issue.
Well, we've answered all of the questions in the chat boxes. A lot of people really appreciated your poetry. So you might want to take a scroll through just to see all the compliments. Okay. I think I have one final question. How do people find professionals? How do property owners go about reaching out to have somebody work on their yard or work on their driveway or private road and know that they're going to be as educated and as passionate about, water quality and things like that? How do they know who to choose, where to find them?
Well, I'm going to start by saying I'm pissed off at the University of New Hampshire for closing down the civil technology program that was at the Thompson School. That's what I went through. It has helped me greatly in my career, and they've eliminated it. A very good friend of mine, engineer, who helps to endow the university, said that they've become a research institution, so don't even bother to talk with them about it. But that was the only place I knew of in the state that really had a civil technology program rather than a civil engineering program. Engineers are not necessarily going to be the ones to solve this. They're working on a different level. The ones who learn from Grandpa, they may be good operators. They may not know some of these modern things. It's hard. The state of Maine, I believe, has actually started I'm not sure whether they call it a road operators list or whatever, but I think they actually have some programs there where they can test people and know what they are. I mean, septic systems, we know we've got licensed septic designers, installers, and now septic evaluators. So you can look at the list there, and that doesn't always necessarily achieve the results that you might want. So I guess you just have to look around. Like I say, I've ended up with 25 developments in the, every mile, 2 mile long road around Conway Lake, and radiating out from there. I had 25 developments because of the reputation I got from doing this. So you could just find somebody with a reputation who's maybe willing to listen. Maybe you need to find somebody young. I just had a letter in the paper yesterday suggesting kids get into the trades instead of wasting their money on a degree in Mediterranean art. I hope there's nobody listening that has a degree in Mediterranean art, but so that's a tough one. It's a really tough one. We're moving more and more away from this practical things. And I'm not sure whether there's any place in the state now that has anything equivalent to a civil technology program. The fellow who's taken over my roads has a degree in agriculture, an associate's in agriculture from Stockbridge, which has given him some soils background and all of that. See, I'm a bit unique in that I've had a designer's installer's license. I've studied soils in school, and so I've had to spend a lot of time studying soils. So that's what roads are made out of, is soils. So that has given me a leg up over a lot of other contractors, perhaps, and they may resent it. What do I know that they don't? Well, I've taken the trouble to learn some stuff, and I've taken the trouble to write it down too.
So we'll just call you. That sounds like
yeah, right. Yeah.
So that's it, and I'm going to hand it back over to Andrea in just a second. But
is she back? She woke up.
Andrea's back on here. I just want to say that Winston wants you to know that he's really proud of his road and that it's in good condition on a hill. So maybe the two of you can touch base and he can show off his hill to you sometime.
Not in Freedom, is it?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
All right, Andrea, I'll put myself.
Oh, well, Russ, again, that was awesome. And I think one way is to have you do more of these presentations to help get the word out, because it sounds like you've got years and years of practical experience, and we need to share it. So I thank everyone for tuning in tonight. And this was brought to you by New Hampshire Lakes. We're a member-supported organization that's working for all of our lakes throughout the state. And we're really pleased to be able to bring in experts like Russ to especially during this time, to bring, lake-friendly living to your home. We have one more session in this series next week. Our friends from Belknap Landscape will be back with us, and they'll be focusing specifically on how to maintain your landscape. So your gardens, your lawn, your vegetated buffers, your driveway, for ice and snow and things like that. So year-round maintenance. So they'll be giving a little bit more of a hands-on presentation next week. And then,
if I can grab a second here, I can take this presentation on the road.
Okay.
I've been all the way down to almost to Keene last year. I did a couple of them in a couple of towns that were just a few minutes away. So I have done this for several lakes associations. Many of them have a specific issue that they want to deal with, right. And I'm more than happy to put my 2 cents worth in, or to turn them over to maybe the NRCS in some cases,
sure.
To maybe for some help. But yes, I'm willing to travel.
Mm-hmm. All right, excellent. So again, please do sign up for our last session, and just to let you know, soon you'll be receiving information from us about another webinar series we'll be doing in July. So stay tuned for that. This evening, you will get an evaluation in the email. Please let us know how we did. Let us know how Russ did. And again, tomorrow morning, you'll get an email from us with links to the slides and the webinar. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for your support of New Hampshire Lakes and for all that you guys do to help keep the lake you love and live near clean and healthy. So be well and stay in touch. And we'll see you again, hopefully next Thursday night.
And thank you.